So if you're a bit of a geography nerd, you probably know that the number of countries in the world isn't exactly a settled number, and it isn't as simple as you thought it might have been. Because it turns out there's no universal definition, except perhaps the UN definition of what a country is, which is, does everyone in the UN agree that you are a country? Which is a bit of an awkward definition, because then we have to wonder whether or not China, Korea, Armenia, Israel exist or not. But we all know that's a bunch of legal fiction, right? The real definition of a country is you'll know it when you'll see it. And in which case, there are two of them in mainland Europe, and I decided instead of reading about them on Wikipedia, I'd just go there and find out whether or not they're real or not. The first port of call, however, was going back to Subotica, which meant taking a flight to Hungary to meet up with my friend, which gave me a lovely chance to check out Hungarian McDonald's, which is leagues ahead of the West in terms of their flavour game, I must admit. I also found out that Hungary is very much an Eastern European nation, because confirmed, they don't have sausage rolls, they have hot dogs, and also their gender norms are normal. They even have pink and blue water. Although what I saw that they think English food is made me kind of throw up. But firstly, a little update on Subotica as I arrived there, which is that the migrant camp that I visited last time was now pretty much abandoned, and new Europeans were nowhere to be seen walking around the town as you drove around the place. It turns out that apparently the Progressive Party Centre graffiti probably did a little more than expected, which is that the Progressive Party now didn't want them in the town because people didn't like having to deal with new Europeans everywhere. So instead, they've moved out of the migrant camp and are now camping out in the woods, I was told. And we can confirm this because we went out looking for them and were able to find signs of human life all over the woods. The Pakistani and Afghan people smuggling gangs are still in this area and still shooting each other, with the occasional shot being heard and the occasional death being reported amongst the refugees. As a quick side note, there is absolutely no threat to life for any refugee in Serbia, but these people still finance the people smuggling gangs in the chance that they can break into Western Europe. But after checking out the local culture, look guys, we have the power of anime and nationalism on our side. We can't lose! Including bonding over Del Boy and indoor smoking in pubs. Boy, am I glad that's not a thing here, I'll be honest. We then decided to head down to Kraljevo, or King City, as 7 Serbian kings were crowned there, right on the border next to Kosovo. King City was the first place for all Serbian refugees fleeing Kosovo at the time of the violence in the 1990s. And many would settle there. In the modern day, as Kosovo continually drifts away from Serbia, apparently the Serbian mafia, I was told, are now moving out of Kosovo and into Kraljevo as well. So, great. Although, this is probably the point at which we should try and explain why Kosovo exists, as many people won't know. And, time to get shouted at by everyone for not mentioning the 1 million grievances that both sides have. Kosovo is a province that has had a very long and complex history, which we don't really have time for. The important thing is that it has always been a mixed territory between the local ethnicities and holds a very important place in Serbian history, as the Battle of Kosovo was the first great stand against the colonizing Turks. The Balkan peoples would all eventually be under Turkish subjugation, with Christians facing higher taxes, discrimination, and having their children castrated and kidnapped to become soldiers for the Ottoman Empire. The Serbs would rebel and migrate away, whilst the Albanians converted to Islam. Eventually, these ethnic groups would found their ethno-states and drive out the Turks. But once Turkish imperialism had ended, the map of these new states overlapped with ethnic groups living outside of their borders, which would lead to many wars. For Kosovo, the story was going to be somewhat worse. The province was part of the Kingdom of Serbia, which then became the multi-ethnic state of Yugoslavia, it was also majority Albanian, but had a significant Serbian population, and the Serbs knew to increase their claim they needed more of their people here. Throughout the following years, there would be many attempts to ethnically alter the land, including ethnic cleansing of Serbs in World War II, and migration of Albanians. By the time the ideological socialist state of Yugoslavia was collapsing into ethno-states, Kosovo Albanians decided they would do the same, with the separatist army of the UJK being declared a terrorist organisation by the Yugoslav government. The horrors of the previous Yugoslav wars began repeating themselves, with crimes against humanity being committed by the Yugoslav army in favour of Serbs against the Albanians, and the UJK kidnapping, killing, and allegedly organ harvesting non-Albanian civilians. The violence was used as a justification by the officially defensive American alliance, NATO, to attack Yugoslavia without UN approval, before replacing Russian peacekeepers with NATO ones. In the process, the Americans almost caused World War III by ordering British troops to attack the Russians. Thankfully, they ignored that order, but that's a story for another time. Since then, the Republic of Kosovo has declared itself an independent multi-ethnic state, but only being recognised by Western-aligned nations, with NATO forces still present to keep the peace. And on the eve of us heading into Kosovo, everyone around us that we'd met were wishing us good luck, had a lovely little feast, and they were hoping that we'd come back alive, which was great. The two Serbian guys I was going with were going to be my guides, and they mentioned that there were some areas we can go to and some that we really are not going to go to. The reason being that there are still places in Kosovo where it's not safe to be a Serb, in the Albanian sections. One of the guides actually told me a story of a Bulgarian member of the NATO forces who was stationed there. Apparently he was in some rural Albanian market shopping, speaking Bulgarian to his mates, and the Albanian merchants thought he was Serbian because they couldn't understand the difference, and so one Albanian merchant shot him in the head. So unless you can get an Albanian guarantor to visit such places, not a great idea, especially if you can only speak a Slavic language. And I was also told it's equally unsafe for Albanians up in the north in the Serbian areas of Kosovo. So on that note, we travelled through the Valley of Lilac down to the border. And once we crossed the border, we discovered that, there is a passport control. Not only do you have to get your passports checked, but if you have Serbian license plates, you also have to cover up the Serbian symbols. Apparently this is part of a new agreement the Serbian government signed with Kosovo, which in no small part really pisses off the Serbs who live there. Understandably so, considering how embarrassing this is. But as we drove through the north of Kosovo, you start to notice a few things. Firstly, the endless Serbian flags that litter the place. Speaking of litter, there's also trash, just everywhere, apparently. You'll also find Serbian government propaganda put up, and right next to the propaganda you'll find bus stops with graffiti written on them calling the Serbian government traitors to the Serbs of Kosovo. We then travelled to Mitrovica, which is a town divided between Serbians in the north and Albanians in the south, and the UK government advises against absolutely all travel to the Serbian area of the town, for security reasons. Being there, to be honest, it seemed fine. I mean, you'll find Serbian flags everywhere, you'll find symbols in solidarity with Russia, comparing Kosovo to Crimea, pretty common in Serbia, and when you go to pay for things, you still need Serbian dinars, not euros. And to be honest, this just makes it seem like anywhere else in southern Serbia. It was mentioned to me that apparently the Serbian government sends 900 million euros every single year to help the Serbs in Kosovo. I'll be honest, I couldn't really figure out where this money had been spent when we were driving around, because frankly, even though it is like southern Serbia, it did seem a bit poorer. I headed down to the Austerlitz Bridge, which divides the town in two, very visibly, and one of my Serbian guys came with me, and the other one said that he would watch us. He sure was not going to cross it, which made everything feel very comfortable. What we found on the other side were NATO forces and Albanians. And this is when I realised that no one seems to fly the Kosovo flag in this place. Instead, they fly the flag of their ethnic group, which is entirely expected, I suppose. From there, we left and headed to the capital of Pristina. And as soon as we left the Serbian northern areas and crossed over into the Albanian, you could see an instant change in the amount of wealth, very visibly, either in the quality of the roads or the fact that the cars people owned all of a sudden all became Mercedes or Volkswagen or some other kind of German brand. Also, the legal currency changed from Serbian dinars to the actual legal currency of Kosovo, which is euros. Even though I don't quite think they're a member of the Eurozone, but whatever. You definitely get the sense that this place is a lot richer. There's a lot more EU money, a lot more EU flags. Kind of feels like Europe. Whereas Serbia definitely doesn't. Feels like the Slavic world. Which, I don't know, I got a bias for, I'll be honest. Being British, death to the EU and all that, but we were looking at the birth rates and whatnot coming down. I mean, there's no way all this money came from here. So, we don't know how long it's all going to last. Not my problem.
Yeah, right.
I just love how Americans talk to it like the new birth of freedom. So everything's freedom.
Yes.
Okay.
There's also a NATO flag.
Yeah.
There on the left.
In the capital, you'll find monuments all over the place to the UJK, and also a statue to the president who ordered the bombing of Serbia, Bill Clinton, which I don't think they would permit in the United States. It felt a bit dictatorish, to be honest, but it was kind of cool. It just says Bill Clinton on the book. I don't know why it says Bill Clinton on the book, but whatever. And after that, we headed over to an abandoned Serbian Orthodox church that's a bit of a sore point for the locals. It was explained to me that it was hoped that this would be used as there would be some ethnic cleaning, and the place would remain part of Serbia. But that wasn't the case, so instead, you just have this abandoned church sitting in the middle of the town. As I got closer to try and film it, some police officers appeared out of absolutely nowhere to shout at me that I'm not allowed to go near the church or film it, and also the only reason they're stopping me is they're scared for my safety because of stray dogs. Okay then. After that, we headed to the old capital of Prizren, and again, you can feel the Islamic Albanian culture in the UJK monuments, the monuments to Greater Albania, and the architecture. And also again, as you approach Serbian churches, you'll notice that the armed police guarding them make a reappearance, and you're also not allowed to film the churches. Driving around, and very, very quickly you obviously can get the sense that this is not Serbian. Everyone here, the dress sense, the clothes in the stores, the types of food they're selling, the mosques, the Turkish fort on the hill. Very much get the sense that you're in Turkey. So I asked the Serbs a little bit, how do you feel about this? And they're like, well, I need to increase my antidepressant dose, so what's that? On the other hand though, it does very much remind me of Newham, or West Ham, or a lot of other parts of East London. Tastes like my hand. The Albanian guide we had in this town was absolutely fantastic, by the way. Thank you, mate, if you're watching. And he explained to me something which I didn't expect to find, which is that he was complaining as we went around, because he's saying hello to almost everyone and seemed to know absolutely everyone in this town. And the reason he was complaining was that apparently loads of people have migrated to this place from the countryside or from Albania and have, in the process, irrevocably changed the culture forever, and this mass migration pisses him off to no small extent, which was highly understandable. As we were walking around and he was complaining about this, we looked at the road, and a Rolls-Royce Phantom, I kid you not, pulled up in front of us both, and we both kind of went a bit silent, looked at each other, and I said, very legitimate businessman, I'm sure. This brings us to the issue that the British have with the Albanian world, and apparently the people of Kosovo also have it, Albanian organised crime. I couldn't help when I was walking around and seeing the wealth there, but think that perhaps quite a lot of this has come from the drug and people smuggling operations throughout Europe and especially in the UK. I mean, it could be something else, I could be wrong, But I'll be honest, I couldn't really figure out what else in that place was creating this much wealth compared to the Serbian areas. And we spent the rest of our time there looking at abandoned buildings that the Serbian families used to live in this area. The guy here was telling me apparently this is what happened to most Serbian houses in this part. They either burn them to the ground so that no one would own them because they didn't want to sell the Albanians, or have someone living there, or it got abandoned. It's turned into stuff like this. Trash. They use horses.
How would you transport it?
Just before we left, I did manage to have a conversation with an Albanian guy who had lived through the war. It certainly showed on his face as we were talking about it. And I asked him the question, which is, the northern provinces that are majority Serbian, why not just let them go, let them join Serbia, and then you wouldn't have to deal with the divide and the constant bickering in the nation anymore? His response stunned me, which is he said, why would we give up something that belongs to us? After that, we headed to go and check out the Serbian enclaves that also exist. These are Serbian communities that exist deep within Albanian parts of Kosovo and are therefore surrounded ethnically by Albanian communities, including the Grisanica Monastery, which is a Serbian endangered UNESCO heritage site, and it showed with the barbed wire surrounding the entire monastery, and as we sat and ate lunch, we could see NATO convoys going past fairly regularly. But that's one of the things that complicates all this. You've still got little enclaves, and the guys I was speaking to were mentioning the fact that if KFOR leaves, people aren't too confident that there won't be any violence. Look, you can buy your own gas station. I don't know what it is, there's loads of like abandoned gas pumps just everywhere. I was told that apparently the Serbian mafia, the first thing they did when they came here was operated black market gas pumps and gas stations. And that was lovely and profitable. And then they figured out they don't pay for electricity in Kosovo, because historically they never did when they were in Yugoslavia. So the mafia went, hang on a minute, what if I build a Bitcoin farm? You know how the number one expenditure is the electricity? Yeah, we don't pay that. Good business model. Down the road, at the cultural centre, you will also find a monument to those who were kidnapped by the UJK, which includes Serbian, Bosniak and Roma civilians. Basically anyone who wasn't an Albanian. It's kind of a weird thing to have at a playground, just a monument to a bunch of people who were all abducted. I think it's the UJK, it said the Kosovo Liberation Army. And God knows what happened to any of them. Good monument though. My friend was just explaining, like, it's not just Serbs obviously, there's Gypsies, loyal Albanians, Romas. Just anyone who wasn't on their side had to be killed. Balkan things for you. After that, we headed out to Serbia, to the city of Niš, so we could go and see the Skull Tower, if for no other reason than to help demonstrate to people just how bloody and grievance-filled this part of the world is. The Skull Tower is a tower built by the Turkish colonizers, made up of skulls of the Serbs who took part in the first Serbian uprising. The Serbs, knowing they were going to lose, piled up gunpowder and waited for the Turks to advance close enough that they could essentially suicide bomb themselves. Upon doing this, this annoyed the Turks so much, they piled up the skulls into a tower on the main road between Constantinople and Vienna, so that everyone would know not to mess with the colonizing Turks. All this ended up doing is pissing off the Serbs so much, and their families who had to come and collect the remains of their dead whilst the Skull Tower wasn't under armed guard at night to bury them, that it ended up causing the second Serbian uprising. Another cute puppy. But this is the site where the first Serb uprising took place, where they piled up the skulls of every Serb they could find who'd taken place in the first uprising into a tower. From this location all the way down into Niš. And the reason for that is because they wanted it to be right next to the toll road. Because the main road from Austria-Hungary to the Turkish capital went right through Niš. So all of the traffic that would go through would have to go right next to this big old tower of skulls they just built, full of Serbian dead, to remind everyone, don't fuck with us. Hey doggy. So right next to the monument to the battle, we found what may be the most, probably technically well-kept Byzantine monastery in all of humanity, because you can smell the paint. Like, the guy has been keeping everything nice and painted so it doesn't fade. I know there's a lot of debate about if you find old buildings or monuments, should you paint over them and keep them up to date, or just let them still in the original form. I'll be honest, I'm preferring him painting it, but I've never been in anything Byzantine. This is the first building I've ever been in that's Byzantine. Makes me realise there are a lot more advanced people in the past than you think. Quickly, I do want to mention how just fantastic the food is in all of Kosovo, from the Serbian communities and the Albanians. I mean, there is something really special down there. I think it's probably because being in between the Ottoman Empire and the Austrian Empire, they've managed to get just the best of both worlds and all the different cakes you could ever think of, which are all just goddamn fantastic. I highly recommend going there for an exotic, cheap holiday if you're looking for one. It wasn't uncommon to get a full meal for essentially $6. But as we were driving back through the north of Kosovo, back into the Serbian areas, and we saw these Serbian countryside communities all across the road, the words from that Albanian guy stuck with me. The quote, "Why would we give up something that belongs to us?" I just found it surreal that he would claim that this all belonged to Albanians, the land and these communities that all were majority Serb. Both of the Serbian guys in the car were pretty depressed about the situation of the Serbs in Kosovo, either in the north, who feel utterly betrayed by their government, at least that's what the graffiti showed, and the conversations I had, and those in the enclaves having to live under NATO protection, day in and day out.
This is what we have been fighting for, to have our national symbols covered up.
It does seem that both ethnic groups seem peacefully next to each other for now, but previous actions and the need for NATO forces to still be present, I think kind of betray any speak about this place being some kind of multi-ethnic paradise. What was clear to me at the end of it is that if you can have your people live on a land and have the military force to protect them, that's what makes the land yours. And as to the question of whether or not Kosovo is a country, I didn't really feel like it, to be honest. It felt like two countries living under a bureaucratic flag that didn't represent either of them. And you can see this through the fact that none of them seem to use it. Instead, they use their respective ethnic flags. To be completely honest, I couldn't really get the phrase NATO colony out of my head as we drove around, with the constant presence of KFOR forces. And I would have thought that any normal solution to this problem would have been a separation between Albania and Serbia. At least that's what these people have on all of their monuments and flying on all of their houses. But either way, it's not my problem to solve. All I can hope is that the communities there can find a future that they can both consent to. As for me, it was time to go and check out something of a mirror opposite of Kosovo by flying to Moldova to go and see the maybe country of Transnistria. Transnistria is everybody's favourite, a Russian minority breakaway state on the border of Ukraine. So, you know, perfectly safe. In fact, if I was to guess that you know anything at all about Transnistria, it's probably due to the Ukrainian war maps that we've all seen. That little red bit on the other side of the front, That's this maybe country. And to be perfectly honest, I was kind of expecting something similar to my visit to Luhansk, which is, I was expecting a strong military presence, a nice, long, lovely chat with Russian immigration officials again, and having to be more professional about what I could and couldn't film in a sensitive place. And I had no reason not to expect this, because if you go on the UK's travel advice website, it advises against literally all travel to Transnistria, due to having no consular support available, and also, you know, that war with Ukraine next door. And it's not hard to see why most people would assume this to be the case, given the history of Transnistria, and the fact that the Russian Federation is its only supporter. The land around this part of the world had been a battle royale for the Russian and Ottoman empires, leading to the settlement of a Russian minority in what was called the Bessarabia province of the Russian Empire. During the Russian Civil War, Romania took control of the territory, as the majority in Bessarabia were Romanians. But then the Soviets came and demanded it be ceded back to them. After the Second World War, the land was divided up internally as part of the Soviet Union, with some of the land going to the Ukrainian Socialist Soviet Republic, and the rest being made into the Moldavian Soviet Republic. The Soviets decided to enforce the Cyrillic alphabet in the Moldovan Soviet, meaning Romanian had to be learned in the Cyrillic alphabet, and was now declared a separate language of Moldovan. So when the Soviet Union collapsed, Romanian nationalists moved to reverse the alphabet change with the long-term hope of rejoining Romania. The Transnistrian population is around 30% Russian, and wanted nothing to do with that, so declared themselves an independent republic, abandoning socialism, but keeping the symbols as a form of old unity. Very similar to the way it's used in the breakaway provinces in Luhansk and Donetsk. If you think that the Russian minority seems a bit small to justify a breakaway state, I would recommend looking up the ethnic maps around this land. The diversity here doesn't exactly keep things stable. Transnistria held a successful referendum and quickly ended up in an independence war with Moldova in the 1990s. They were supported by Cossacks from the Russian Federation, ethnic Gagauz, who were also trying to break away into their own ethno-state in Moldova, and Ukrainian fascists, who hoped to integrate Transnistria into Ukraine. After all, it is also around about 20% Ukrainian, and at that time, relations between Moscow and Kiev were pretty good. Of course, these percentages have moved somewhat over time, especially with refugees from Ukraine. In fact, if you look up hotels in this region, you'll find that there are discounts for Ukrainian refugees. Eventually, a ceasefire was reached, and Russian peacekeepers were sent to Transnistria to keep it enforced. Obviously, the situation is now a bit more awkward, especially since when Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, Transnistria pleaded with them to do the same. So after stopping off in Romania to pay my respects to the top gangster in the region, I found myself in Moldova and then started heading towards the border with Transnistria. And I'll be honest, I was a little bit worried about what I might find. After going through a bit of a dodgy border checkpoint and getting my migration card, what I found was actually a really nice part of the world. The hotel was very luxury for around $50 a night. The food was absolutely awesome. To be honest, quite a lot of burgers and sushi, but I like burgers and sushi, so no problems there. A beautiful but not busy city, and unlike Kosovo, I was actually quite hard-pressed to try and find any military presence commonly around the area. In fact, stumbling around, I was actually able to make friends with a Romanian tourist who just happened to be there. So hey, I made it to Transnistria, or as it's called in English, Transnistria, which is where all the trans flag jokes have been coming from recently. If you've seen that image on Twitter, I'll put it on screen. But one of the things that's interesting is already being here, I had to go out and film because I wanted to show you the lights, because it's something I actually missed in the new Russia video to show, which is in the center. They have these really pretty fairy lights everywhere. And here, not only all the buildings lit up, you've got the pretty fairy lights over here as well. I don't know how well you can see it, but it's basically just anywhere. Nice little fairy lights. I'll probably go back here tomorrow, but I want to show one more thing real quick, which is just, for people who don't know, it's obviously a partially recognized country, and it's in the Russian sphere. So of course, there are two other partially recognized countries in the world, in the Russian sphere. which are Abkhazia and South Ossetia. So here, they fly both of their flags as well, to show solidarity with countries of the world that struggle with recognition, I suppose. Thought I'd just show you this as well. Anyway, speaking of all this trans jokes, I don't know what they think of it here, but be sure to ask. Correction, I'll be sure to be asked at some point, I imagine. Everywhere I go in the East, someone asks, so is that real, what they're doing in the West? I have to sit there and be like, yeah, and it's worse than you think. We asked, well, we didn't ask, it came up at the dinner table in Serbia. One conversation about doing it to kids. And the Serbian opinion was that that was a crime against humanity or some kind of war crime. But what would they know? Serbs don't commit war crimes. So far so good, no problems. In fact, I'm actually quite pleasantly surprised at how nice it is. And the thing about Transnistria is, of course, a lot of YouTubers come here and show off, you know, look at the statue of Lenin and whatnot. We'll do that, of course. But I do love how you end up with, you know, like the old trucks, the old cars, old buildings. But there is a little bit of a snag to this part of the world, which I'm sure people have seen, which is it borders Ukraine. Which is why you get signs telling you which road to take if you want to go to Odessa. Now, my understanding is that the Russian Federation guarantees the independence of Transnistria. So, they need military protection from Moldova, who say that it's part of Moldova. So, the Russian army is here in small numbers, but not insignificant, to make sure that this place is kept independent and the peace is kept. That's why they're called Russian peacekeepers officially. Sorry, puppy. Which kind of complicates things, of course, because of the Russian Federation's war with Ukraine. And if there are Russian Federation troops here on the border of Ukraine, but technically in Moldova, well, Kiev's a bit worried, but at the same time they can't do anything about it. They're not about to invade. Oh, hello, puppy. Well, stray dogs. Anyway, you go in Eastern Europe, it seems. Because, of course, if the Ukrainians did try to invade, they don't recognise Transnistria, so they'd be invading Moldova, which would be an act of war. So instead, everyone's just sat in this kind of stalemate. No one here seems to be bothered by it. So this is actually kind of cool. Because this is the main street here, 25th of October Street. Right next to it's Rosa Luxemburg Street, and then Karl Lieblich Street, or whatever else, some other commie. Which, you know, that's what everyone comes here to show. Because it is the remnants of the Soviet Union in that form. But what's quite nice is I was just seeing here, like the bus stops are incredibly royal. There's a little coffee machine there I was talking to some boys about. There's like a vending machine that looks like something out of, I don't know, cyberpunk dystopia, or... oh, no, not dystopia, but like utopia. And you've got these lovely little benches and bins, the kind of thing you'd expect from, I don't know, Elizabeth Gardens or something like that in England. And I realised why. Because of course they're still very happy to show off the Russian Empire. So for example, Tsarina over here. So right next to the commie heaven, you've got the royalist stuff, which you can see the royalist stuff has been built definitely since the collapse of the Soviet Union. It looks too good for that, and yeah, I don't think they'd ever approved that either back in the day. You know, the whole killing of the monarchy and stuff. But anyway, let's go look at the commie heaven, the bit that Bold and Bankrupt and everyone else has shown, which is right to, because it's something incredible. Здравствуйте. England.
England?
Yeah, you? Romania.
Yeah, nice meeting you.
Good to meet you.
Not many tourists around here.
No. But anyway, this is the T-34, the famous one. Stuck here. Now, I don't know how... I'm going to start referring it to as a Laserpig T-34 at this point. This one is. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go and watch this video on the T-34 production. There were some corners cut so that they could produce more tanks, which, you know, has got positives and negatives. But anyway, here's the tank. Parliament's just over there. And then we've got an Orthodox church and a monument to the Great Patriotic War. I happened, just so turned up, to bump into another tourist. He's Romanian, his name's John. And we're gonna try and help each other out, I suppose. So this is John. Say hi.
Hi. Hi.
How long are you here for? Just a day? Or?
Oh yes, just one.
Okay.
In the afternoon, I'm going back to Chisinau.
Fair enough. I wonder, can you understand everyone in Chisinau or not?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's all Romanian.
Romanian, no. You know.
I do wonder, is this... Yeah. Chernobyl.
Chernobyl, yeah. Wow, this is amazing.
I mean, there probably were... I think they call them liquidators. The people who went to Chernobyl to clean up. So there probably were people from...
From here as well.
Yeah.
Might be.
And then this is the Independence War. I mean, I don't know if this is foreshadowing, but there's a blank slate here. Already a statue with a guy with an AK. The old kind, but I don't want to be that guy, but if there is another war, guy with an AK is going to fit whatever it is. Anything happens in the East, guy with an AK. That's the military. Well, I wish I could read Russian better, but I'm an idiot.
It's in Russian and in Ukrainian over there.
Ah, okay, so we've got Ukrainian, Russian, and
it's
Moldovan.
Moldavian and Cyrillic.
Okay, so this is a coffee machine. And I don't know how it works, but we'll find out, I suppose. 10, there we go. So these are Transnistrian rubles, which are not plastic yet. Right. What do I want to get? Chocolate. Down here? No? Do I get change? Or do I just get robbed?
Be careful.
There we go.
Oh, voila.
There we are. No rubles? No change? Alright, go fuck myself.
How it tastes?
It's alright. Pretty good.
It's warm, right?
7 rubles. I think that's 50 cents. So I'm assuming all those faces there are the people in charge of whatever ministry or whatever job they've got. Otherwise, I don't know. But the reason I think that's there is walking along, my friend here, John, turns around and goes, "Oh, building, very interesting. Dom Soviet, maybe." And we turn around, yeah, it is the house of the Soviets. We finally found the Sheriff supermarket. Which, you know, remember sheriffs? They're all from Russia, right? I don't know why they named it this. I don't know.
Do you want to go inside?
Yeah. I'm just wondering why they named it Sheriff, because, you know, it's American. Sheriffs.
There are the stuff.
Oh. I can smell it from here. Fuck that. Good luck. So that's some, like, abandoned public toilet there, which John's decided he's going to go in. I'm not. Fuck that. That is not cool. There were a couple of odd moments to that day. Getting a bit too close to the Parliament building and taking photos will actually cause a Transnistrian soldier to come out and tell you to bugger off, which is fair enough. Checking out the city, we were able to find the rich parts, including department stores where you can buy PlayStation 5s, amazing, and also the poorer parts when you get off the main streets. Got myself some new clothes with some beautiful text. What does this say again? Be the change positive. In fact, Transnistria even has its own currency, the Transnistrian ruble, or Pridnestrovyan ruble, as it's said in Russian. Transnistria is called Pridnestrovia in Russian, but it's not the word we use in English, so I'm just going to keep using Transnistria. But one of the funny things is that when I was studying Russian, One of the books I had is quite old. It's from the Soviet Union era, and mentioned kopecks as the divisible currency. You have rubles like pounds, and then kopecks like pennies or cents. And in Russia, of course, the currency is so inflated that they're not used anymore. They don't exist. But the Transnistrian ruble still has them. So you can still get authentic coins that have little Soviet symbols on them. The next day, I decided to head out to the town called Bender, which is where most of the fighting took place during the Independence War, which also had some very serious Chernobyl vibes, walking around the outskirts. But the inside of the town is just like any other town in the east. Well, I didn't actually want to go to Bender Castle, but now we're in Bender's Castle. Bit of miscommunication between me and the taxi driver. Oh well, still nice. I'll be honest, I've come to a crossroads. In front of me is the castle, which I don't really care about. And to the left of me is a bunch of guns. Difficult decision. So I was just finishing off my boat with meat, which is what Google translated whatever the hell I just ate. I'm walking down into Bender, and this is the first thing you see. I was just reading the Transnistrian version of history and the weapons place there, and they were mentioning about how Bender was apparently where most of the fighting was. Of course, Tiraspol being over a bridge, you've got to take this place first, not to mention the big bloody fortress. So hundreds of people died here, and that's where most of the fighting was. You also see these endless flowers. The same ones everyone is growing in Tiraspol. I thought it was a bit weird, and then I remembered last night I saw a bunch of old babushkas outside. They were selling piles of these flowers. I don't know who's buying them, but trying to make money, I guess. They've still got like the Mayday stuff, never mind the new stuff. But hey, if it works, it works. That's what my Serbian friend kept telling me. I was like, oh, look at this commie stuff, and he's like, yeah, you know, most of it was crap, but the stuff that remained, it still works somehow, so can't be that bad. So I've not quite found it, but I have found some peacekeepers just behind me at that hotel. Bunch of guys in military uniform smoking, staring at me. I noticed they don't have Tiraspol, they don't have Transnistrian patches, they have Russian patches. So I don't know if I found the monument, but found the peacekeepers themselves. Didn't look too pleased at my camera, so not gonna raise any attention if I can help it. Don't want to get the wrong idea. But I did find this, which is a memorial to all the dead Jews. Yet. Well, there's definitely nothing in it. It's been stripped. Just that quote from, was it Sherbina, the minister? Dead Jews, dead Poles. No one ever thinks it's going to happen to them, though. Talking about the fact that Pripyat used to be occupied by Jews and Poles that were all killed. We've got here, somewhat the same. This place has different history, obviously. That's one way of doing it. Little velvet rope. Well, I'm English, so it's going to work for me. The next day I decided to get on a little bus and head out to the rural places to see if there was any kind of cleanup in the capital for tourists and see what life was like for the rest of the country. What I found was that it's just as nice as the city, just, you know, rural life as it is. Got on a bus with the lovely receptionist who was helping me out, and I've come to Slobodsia, which is kind of funny. You get on the bus and they're like, oh, many towns away, here's the prices for all of them, and it's all like 10 pence, or something like that, you know, 50 pence. But I just love how they're making it look like here's a big connected bus route, and it's literally just a couple of towns over, which is a couple of stops. But it means we get to go out and see, is the rest of the country just as nice as the centre? It certainly seemed as clean driving down here. She kept telling me that, oh no, there's some dirt and plastic out there, but still hunting. But like anywhere, in the former Soviet Union, even a rural town, you go to the center, what do you find? The bald guy. Always the bald guy. Anyway, some lovely pillars. Oh look, some Soviet pillars. Anyway, yet more monuments to wars and Soviet stuff. You know, the usual. This one's to Afghanistan. Second World War. Because in the UK, our tradition is to put up one monument. It's kind of like a sword or a cross. Sometimes it's a cross with a sword on it. And it says for the glorious dead or something like that. I mean, the amount of skill that must go into this. Carving that into stone. Or sandblasting it, or however else they do it. Not to mention the statues. The square. The eternal flame, and then the obelisk of glory or whatever else. And you find this just everywhere. I mean, like, we put the crosses in pretty much every town, but it's just nothing like this. Seems like a good message from an old hookah bar with a broken swing set. One thing I did notice though, just over here, quality of graffiti, massively different as well. Look at that. How great that is. Love to have that scribbled all over some walls in England. No, what do we get? Someone's crappy signature written 10 times. I was walking to work one day. Some bloody kid had done it on the Italian's windows. So he's out there scraping it off, and you just think, oh, what a bunch of bellends. But no, if he'd done that, he'd probably leave it up. Anyway, just walking down. Nice little houses. Perfectly normal. Did see a couple that had more decorations on the entrance. They'd added little red stars and stuff. Must be patriotic folks. Again, another Sheriff supermarket and Sheriff gas station. Apparently they're the only big boys in town. Everywhere else is just a small magazine shop selling bread, soda, cakes, blah blah blah, the usual stuff. Apparently there was someone else who tried to set up some competition, and very quickly his business failed. And Sheriff remains the only big business, which is good for them. Apparently this is what people sort of grumble about. The only real political divide. How much power and money Sheriff must have and the people who own it. But at the same time, they're not really mad about it, at least to everyone I've asked about that, because they recognise, well, without them we'd be much worse off. So, reminds me of Walmart, to be honest. People moan about it, but if it wasn't for mega stores, things would be more expensive.
The only thing that did worry me is that I was walking around and suddenly got a text from my phone company saying, "Welcome to Ukraine," which is probably just because I got a bit too close to the border.
I'm quite impressed walking around. I mean, you read the statistics online. $250 average monthly wage. And you look around and you think, they're not doing too bad for it. I mean, yeah, life's not the best in the world. You haven't got the highest electronics and blah, blah, blah. I was chatting to the lady about how difficult it is to buy a house, and this is why people go to Europe to work. And I don't not understand that, but I do find it impressive. Just on that average salary. Life isn't hell on earth. Could be way, way worse.
This is a ZIL. It's a quality from Soviet Union. ZIL Moscow.
Do you still use it to put stuff in, or?
Yeah.
It's got a little freezer box too.
It's working, yeah. This is a, you know what is it?
Water.
Water. This apparat 1978 year. Yeah. this is 1961.
Opera.
Да.
It still runs. Do you have the lights?
It's a good
Yeah.
one seat, yeah, one together.
I feel like I'm in the 50s.
It's a good with girl. go with girl.
Yeah. There's no gearbox here
Yeah.
stopping you.
Problem.
Rabbit's foot or
No, I don't know. He's yeah.
dog?
You look no dog. Yeah, I think here maybe four. Okay.
Да, спасибо большое.
The next day I did some antique shopping and then had to head home, which is probably a good time to mention, as usual, these weren't cheap. So if you like what I do, you can subscribe on Subscribestar to help pay for these things. But also, for new people, I like to bring back stuff that I can find along the way to sell to help fund these trips as well. So if you like what I do and would like to get something in return, you can buy some of the various things I brought back, which are nice and fun. Such as the Pridnestrobian ruble. I got some of the plastic coins, which were actually legal tender, and still are, in Pridnestrovia. I think it's the first plastic currency ever. Soviet-era medals, Pridnestrovian document holders, and from Kosovo, plenty of fridge magnets about the UJK, and I managed to run into a coin dealer as well, who was able to sell me some rather interesting coins, such as, well, fascist occupation Albanian currency, with little fascist symbols on them. Yeah. He also gave me coins from the Ottoman Empire, which had still survived. Full list of items in the description, and link to Subscribestar in the description as usual. Thank you guys. As to the question of whether or not Transnistria is a country, well, it certainly felt more like a country than Kosovo did, if I'm being perfectly honest. They have their own currency, their own borders, and the military presence is not so overwhelming as it was in Kosovo. Apparently, at the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, there were military checkpoints and some shenanigans going on, but that's all been scaled back, and now at no point was I stopped or felt like I wasn't safe to film something. In fact, on the way out, the taxi driver who was taking me to the airport let me in on a little secret that they have there. Apparently, what you can do is the local Transnistrians can get Russian citizenship, which makes them eligible to be Russian peacekeepers. So a lot of the Russian military force as peacekeepers that are there are apparently locals, which makes perfect sense. It saves for the Russian taxpayer in terms of salaries, because paying a Transnistrian costs a fraction of what it would for paying a Russian, and also it provides employment for Transnistrians that are in dire need of it. I can't confirm this, of course, it's just what I was told, but it did make perfect sense. Also, as a side note, one of the things I saw that a lot of the patch-wearing military guys in Transnistria were quite a bit older than the ones I saw in Luhansk. But as to the question of what the hell is Transnistria, honestly, kind of just feels like a meme that's got out of hand. Especially when you are walking around and you find Soviet monuments right next to Tsarist monuments. But then again, this kind of absurdity of acceptance of both extremes of your past and putting them next to each other is frankly something that also happens in the Russian Federation and is considered perfectly normal. I suppose that's what makes them so interesting. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed. Keep yourself safe, and if you like what I do, as I mentioned, you can always go over to Subscribestar, help me out. Otherwise, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.